Let's examine some of the programming concepts that we're going to cover in this series. The first concept we're going to focus on is the difference between literal values and expressions. A literal value is typically a word, a sentence, or a number, such as 33 or 7 or the word hello. An expression is a combination of these literal values that you want to interpret. For example, 3 plus 7 or 5 divided by 4. Or it might involve text, such as the combination of the words hello and goodbye. As your code produces results and calculations, typically you will wish to output that to a window for your own benefit or for some other user. Variables are symbols that are used to track values. Variables can be set equal to numbers, words and sentences, or true-false states. An example of a variable might be the word sales. Sales could equal, for instance, 100,000. Some variables are multiple words strung together, such as year incorporated. Year incorporated might be set to 1970. Your code will work with these variables. Since you don't always know the value in question, your code will produce formulas and process the names of these variables that represent the ultimate values. Once you've mastered the concept of variables, you can apply them in conditionals. Conditionals are constructs in programming that allow you to make decisions about what code you'd like to execute depending on conditions related to your variables. For example, if sales were more than 100,000, you might choose to execute a block of code that changes a tax bracket. Loops are very similar to conditionals in the sense that they execute a block of code depending on a condition being true. The difference between a loop and a conditional is that a loop will continue over and over again to execute the same block of code with your instructions in it while that condition is true. An example might be, while you have not run out of products to depreciate, process each product and depreciate it. Objects are a concept very similar to variables, only with a little bit more complexity. Objects are used in JavaScript to better simulate the real world. In the real world, you have various objects, and each object has various properties associated with it, and various things you can do with it. An example might be a room. For a room, the properties of that object might include the color of the walls, the temperature, or the square footage. Each object in the real world has various actions that you can perform on it. In the case of the room, you could clean the room, you could repaint the room, or you could rearrange the room. In the context of JavaScript, there are several built-in objects, and there are also objects that you can create of certain types. For example, you can create a date object to represent Labor Day of 1970. For each object, there are again various properties and various things that you can do with that object. In the case of the Labor Day date instance, you might wish to find out what the property for the day of week that was. Which day of the week did Labor Day in 1970 fall upon? Likewise, there are actions that you can perform on those objects, such as calculating the difference between the current time and the time of that Labor Day. We'll examine more objects in this series. Arrays are variables that contain multiple values. A normal variable such as sales is only equal to one value, 100,000 perhaps. An array, however, has a set of values within it that are indexed by number. For example, you might have different sets of sales for different years. You could retrieve the sales for a particular year by supplying a number to index that year and retrieve the corresponding sales value. Functions are a means by which you can assign a word to represent a whole set of instructions. If you anticipate using a set of instructions more than once in your code, instead of copying and pasting all 10 or 12 lines into different places in your code, you can assign a word to represent all 10 or 12 instructions, and then use just that word inside your code more than once.